I got to tell you, I won a $10 bet with an old friend, but I wasn't sure if it was good news or bad news. If you remember back in early February when President Trump first started talking about putting on a 25% tariff on Canadian exports to the US, well, there was a huge outcry about the economic damage. We were told it was an emergency, and suddenly it seemed like everyone was talking about the economy. Even people who've been fighting the oil and gas industry for years were suddenly saying it was our most valuable weapon in the tariff dispute. Well, I couldn't remember another time when the economy was truly the topic of the day. And that brought on the bet. I said I didn't think the interest in the economy and the financial issues would last more than a couple of weeks before the regular political drama slash BS took center stage. My friend said, "Hey, do you want to bet?" I said, "Sure." And come on, we're both big timers, so we bet $10. And as I said, he's already handed over to me. I mean, there's been no meaningful discussion of the economy, declining capital investment, consequences of the increase in government debt. There's been very little talk, especially from the Liberal government, about the jump in the cost of living or the 2 million Canadians using food banks. I mean, it's not a big surprise that the Liberals don't want to talk about their economic and financial record of the last 10 years, given the relentless stream of negative data. And by the way, before Liberal partisans get mad, consider that a couple of weeks before the campaign started, Mark Carney himself stated that the economic growth we've been experiencing was founded on out of control population growth and excessive government spending. And he stated in quotes, "Our economy was weak before threats from Donald Trump." But it's interesting that the only time we get a chance to hold politicians to account for broken promises, for pushing unpopular policies not mentioned in the previous campaign, we hold them account for incompetence, for conflict of interest slash cronyism. Well, the only time is during an election. But if the polls are accurate, a lot of Canadians don't believe in holding our politicians to account. But be that as it may, as JP Morgan once warned, you can ignore politics and economics. The problem is they won't ignore you, as tens of millions of Canadians have just found out, dealing with things like unaffordable rent, the rise in the cost of living, increased taxes, food prices that have gone up over 25% in the last 4 years. And I think young people are finding out the hard way. Unfortunately, the hard way is going to continue for years when you've got the escalating federal debt taken on in a period of increased global sovereign debt risk, which puts upward pressure on both taxes and interest rates, along with the further erosion of the purchasing power of the dollar. Now, I would normally say things like, be careful, if we don't clean this stuff up, we're in for really tough, hard financial times. But if I say that now, I'm ignoring the millions who already are. 43% of Canadians under 40 have to borrow to buy necessities. 25% of Canadians say they're living in poverty. It's interesting, though, the party platforms all call for an increase in the federal debt. Liberals are promising, or forecasting and promising, a whopping $225 billion more in debt over 4 years. Conservatives are less than half of that with a $100 billion increase, NDP with $48 billion increase. I mean, the record debt and the vulnerability to changes in the interest rate market is why the number one thing we should be looking at right now is the party platforms regarding economic growth. I mean, given the increasing size of the debt, we can't continue with what's been going on. We can't afford it. Stagnation for the last 5 years, zero growth in productivity, zero growth in real GDP per capita, an average of 0.3% in real wage gains and declining business investment, which must be reversed. We need business investment if we're going to protect our standard of living, especially that of younger Canadians. And that means creating a tax and regulatory environment to attract capital investment. And that's not going to happen with higher taxes on companies. I like the way Stephen Nagy put it, writing for the Macdonald Laurier Institute. He summed it up, the whole election, by saying, "This election represents more than a partisan contest. It is a referendum on whether Canada requires fundamental policy correction after a decade of diminished economic performance and international standing." End of quote. Well, I'll give you a final thought. At election time, I think of the tens of thousands of Canadians who have fought, died, and who continue to serve in the armed forces, defending our freedoms, including the right to vote. I think the least we can do is take it seriously. set aside the superficial or the emotional and approach it with a clear-eyed practicality that's rooted in reality, especially when it comes to the economy and our finances. I think we owe them that much.